अस्सलाम वालेकुम। एक्टिविटी बेस्ड कॉस्टिंग हमारा मौजू है जिसको हम पिछले चंद लेक्चर से डिस्कस करते रहे। प्रोडक्ट कॉस्ट में हमें मालूम है कि 3 मेजर कंपोनेंट्स होते हैं, एक डायरेक्ट मटेरियल, एक डायरेक्ट लेबर और ओवरहेड्स। आमतौर पर जो प्रोडक्ट कॉस्टिंग की जाती है उसमें डायरेक्ट मटेरियल, डायरेक्ट लेबर के बाद ओवरहेड्स की एलोकेशन और ओवरहेड्स की एलोकेशन प्रोडक्ट को, ये एक इम्पॉर्टेंट चीज़ होती है। हाउ वी एलोकेट overheads to what we call cost objects or products. Traditionally, these overheads are allocated on some basis such as machine hours or direct labor hours, which we have called volume related basis. And we have seen that in activity based costing, the entire work area is divided into various activities being performed, tasks being performed, and those tasks are grouped together as individual activities, and the costs are then assigned to activities. These costs are assigned to what we call cost objects by use of cost drivers. So these cost drivers are established by using a rate based on the consumption by the product of this activity. Cost drivers are identified by the organization, they are established, and then they are calculated to transfer or allocate cost to the products. This is how activity is the basis on which costs are allocated to products and not some volume related method such as machine hours or labor hours. So the entire floor area of the organization can be separated or divided into various tasks, and the tasks are grouped together to form one activity where all the costs related to the tasks can be identified and measured by one single cost driver. Therefore, the overhead cost is being allocated to the activities and the products are being charged for the amount of activity consumed by the product. This is the basis of activity-based costing. In this activity, today we are going to discuss there are several hierarchies in activities. Activity के एक तरह से दर्जे कहना चाहिए कि दर्जे देखे जा सकते हैं. Hierarchy indicates the level of activity. एक यूनिट लेवल की मिसाल के तौर पर एक्टिविटी है, एक बैच लेवल की है. तो इसको हम तफसील से देखते हैं स्लाइड में. एक्टिविटी हायरार्कीज. मैन्युफैक्चरिंग एक्टिविटीज कैन बी क्लासिफाइड along a cost hierarchy dimension consisting of unit level activities, batch level activities, product level, product sustaining activities, and facility sustaining activities. So now we are saying that we have a basis in which we can classify activities into 4 different hierarchies. One, we said, is the unit level hierarchy. The other is the batch level activity. And then we have product sustaining. Unit किसे कहेंगे? Unit एक product को, एक production, एक unit of product जो है, एक unit का product. Batch में जब production होती है तो batch production होती है मुख्तलिफ बैचेस में, एक बैच इकट्ठा प्रोड्यूस होता है तो वो बैच लेवल एक्टिविटी। प्रोडक्ट सस्टेनिंग एक्टिविटी वो होगी कि जो प्रोडक्ट की कंटिन्यूटी को इंश्योर करती है, और फैसिलिटी सस्टेनिंग एक्टिविटी वो होगी जो फैसिलिटी को कंटिन्यूटी प्रोवाइड करती है। यूनिट लेवल एक्टिविटीज, also known as volume related activities, are performed each time a unit of product or service is produced. लिहाजा जैसे जैसे प्रोडक्शन यूनिट्स की होती है वैसे वैसे यूनिट लेवल एक्टिविटीज परफॉर्म हो रही होती हैं। Expenses in this category include direct labor, direct material, energy costs, and expenses that are consumed in proportion to machine processing time, such as maintenance. For example, as 10% more units are going to be produced, it might be that 10% more labor, or 10% more machine hours, or 10% energy cost in addition will be consumed. So these activities which are directly proportional to the unit level production, then they are called unit level activities. Unit level activities consume resources in proportion to the number of units produced. जैसे जैसे यूनिट्स प्रोड्यूस हो रहे हैं वैसे वैसे ये एक्टिविटीज़ कंज्यूम हो रही हैं, लिहाजा इनकी जो इंक्रीज है इन कॉस्ट वो होगी प्रोपोर्शनल टू द अमाउंट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन। तो ये एक यूनिट लेवल की एक्टिविटी जो हम इसको वेरिएबल कॉस्ट में भी शामिल करते हैं कि जैसे प्रोडक्शन वेरी करेगी वैसे ये कॉस्ट वेरी करेगी। वो एक्टिविटीज़ जो ऐसी कॉस्ट को अराइज करती हैं जो कि प्रोडक्शन के साथ वेरी करे, ये होंगी यूनिट लेवल एक्टिविटीज़। बैच रिलेटेड एक्टिविटीज़, बैच रिलेटेड एक्टिविटीज़ such as setting up a machine or processing a purchase order are performed each time a batch of goods is produced. The cost of batch related activities varies with the number of batches made, but is fixed for all units in the batch. Production कई दफ़ा batches में होती है। बैच का मतलब है कि a number of products are being produced together. बैच लिहाजा जब रन होता है यूजुअली एक बैच के अंदर इक्वल नंबर ऑफ यूनिट्स होते हैं, तो वो प्रोडक्शन बैचेस में हो रही होती है। अब जो बैच रिलेटेड एक्टिविटीज है वो उस वक्त वेरी करेंगी जैसे जैसे बैचेस आप प्रोड्यूस करेंगे। लिहाजा वी आर सेइंग दैट बैच लेवल एक्टिविटीज आर गोइंग टू वेरी, द कॉस्ट ऑफ दीज एक्टिविटीज is going to vary with the number of batches being produced. Each time a batch is produced, the activities that need to be done, this will include things like setting up machines. Every time you need a production run, you need to set up machines, you need to perhaps do activities such as cleaning, inserting material in the machines, inserting lubrication, inserting other kind of agents, and then having a supervisor come and check. So all this is setup activity. So batch related activity, an example of that would be setup activity. For example, setup resources are consumed when a machine is changed from one product to another. As more batches are produced, more setup resources are consumed. It would cost the same to set up a machine for 10 or 5,000 items. So we are saying that usually if you want to shift production from one product to another product, An organization might be producing several products. When you change production from product A to product B, usually setup is required for a different product. मिसाल हम इसकी इस तरह ले सकते हैं जैसे कि जूसेस मैन्युफैक्चर हो रहे हों और एक जूस है लेट्स से ऑरेंज जूस. आपने प्रोडक्शन की हुई है एक बैच की ऑफ प्रोड्यूसिंग ऑरेंज जूस. अब उसी मशीन पर और उसी फैक्ट्री में वो मैंगो जूस भी बना सकते हैं. तो जब वो शिफ्ट करेंगे प्रोडक्ट यानी ऑरेंज जूस से मैंगो जूस की प्रोडक्शन में, तो ये प्रोडक्शन शिफ्ट जो है यहाँ पर एक दोबारा सेटअप करना पड़ेगा. सेटअप एक्टिविटी इन्वॉल्व होगी. उसमें मैंगो का रॉ मटेरियल डाला जाएगा, ऑरेंज की मशीन्स को अच्छी तरह क्लीन आउट किया जाएगा. जो साइज ऑफ पैकेजिंग है वो भी डिपेंड करेगा, लार्ज साइज, स्मॉल साइज. ये सारा सेटअप एक्टिविटी है और ये है जो हम कहते हैं बैचेस के अंदर प्रोडक्शन है. प्रोडक्शन इज बाय बैचेस एंड सो टू प्रोड्यूस a batch of mango juice after a batch of orange juice, this setup of machinery is required. This setup of machinery is going to involve costs, and so we can say that these costs are going to relate to the number of batches being produced. Each time production is shifted from one product to another, machines and etc. setup activity is involved and setup costs are involved. So these costs we can say will vary according to batches, and this setup activity can therefore be regarded as batch level activity, and the cost of setup will vary according to the batches, number of batches that are being produced, or we can say the number of products that are being produced. The more will be the number of products that we produce, the more batches are going to be required and more setup time will be required. Thus, demand for setup resources is independent of the number of units produced after setup. Within a single batch, the setup costs that have been incurred will not change by the number of units being produced in the batch. So, in our example of orange juices and mango juices, once we have shifted and set up our machine to produce mango juices, then that cost will not change if we produce 100 liters of mango juice or if we produce 1000 liters of mango juice, because then that is production activity, that is unit activity. So therefore we have said the demand for batch level activity is going to depend on the number of setups but not on the number of units produced within the batch. Similarly, purchase resources are consumed each time a purchase order is processed, but the resources consumed is independent of the number of items on the purchase order. In the same way, purchasing is an activity, and purchasing activity involves costs. These costs can comprise obtaining quotations from the market, obtaining requisitions from the consumers, obtaining various quotes and identifying suppliers and things of that nature, and then processing the order, sending out the order, and then receiving the goods. Now, all this purchasing activity will need to be done every time a purchase order needs to be raised, but the cost will not change in accordance with the number of items on the purchase order. So the purchase order can be for 100 items, and you will have 100 items listed on the purchase order, or it can be for 3 items, and 3 items would be listed on the purchase order. It would be one single purchase order, and therefore the cost of the purchase order will not change according to the number of items being ordered. Other examples of batch-related costs include the resources devoted to production scheduling, sample inspection, and materials movement. Traditional costing systems treat batch-related expenses as fixed costs. ABC systems assume that batch-related expenses vary with the number of batches processed. This is one area, therefore, where a significant difference arises in the treatment of expenses in the traditional system and the activity-based system. These batch-related type expenses under the traditional system is regarded as fixed cost, and so the total cost is taken as fixed and therefore allocated on some arbitrary basis to the number of units. Under the activity-based system, these costs are going to be allocated based on the cost driver, which will be the number of setups or the number of batches. So the usage of each product is going to determine the cost allocated to it, and that's why ABC is regarded as providing more accurate cost information. Product sustaining activities. These are performed to enable continued production and sale of an individual product. Examples include maintaining and updating product specifications and technical support provided to individual products. So product sustaining activities. By this, we mean the activities that are going to ensure the continuity of the product. So in a way, this is the support being given to an individual product. In our example of juices, for example, there might be a research department that is formulating the recipe for production of this juice to provide a particular taste profile. And therefore, this research type activity, which is going on to ensure that the taste profiling, the color, the overall appearance, the packaging, all this is supporting that product and trying to keep up the requirements and the demands of customers and markets to make sure that this product continues to be sold and continues to be consumed in the markets. All this is activity which we are saying is sustaining the continuity of the product. So these type of activities, which will include improvements to product, it will include maintenance of specific machinery which is required for the production of this particular product. It will include the formulations and the recipes. It will include the marketing efforts and things of that nature. So product sustaining activities, this is a level which is slightly now different to the batch level. Batch level related to production. Product level sustaining activities now are those that ensure continuity of production and sale of the product. Other examples are the resources to prepare and implement changes in design and test routines and to perform product enhancements. The costs of product sustaining activities are incurred irrespective of the number of units produced or batches processed. Their expenses will tend to increase as the number of products is increased. The product sustaining activities can involve engineering efforts, marketing efforts, different efforts to try to see that this product is being produced and sold on a continual basis. The costs that are incurred in product sustaining are also not related to either the number of batches produced or the number of units within a batch. Therefore, they are non-volume related. The volume of production, the volume of output is something separate. The costs that will relate to sustaining the product are going to be independent of the number and quantity of units produced. The last hierarchy that we will discuss is the facility sustaining activity. These are performed to support the facility's general manufacturing process and include general administrative plant management, and property costs. They are incurred to support the organization as a whole and are common and joint to all products manufactured in the plant. The next level hierarchy that we are talking about is the facility sustaining activity. So after product sustaining, we look at the larger perspective of sustaining the facility. And this, we said, includes costs such as administrative staff. It includes costs such as senior level management, plant management staff, and it includes property costs. So these costs are again those kind of costs which are not going to change with the production or volume, and they are going to be regarded mainly as irrelevant to most decision making in respect of production, products, number of units, type of products, and number of batches and production scheduling. This is therefore the facility sustaining activity. This will normally include the support that is being provided to the organization. This will include the kind of activity that ensures continuity of the organization. Product sustaining was ensuring the continuity of the product. Facility sustaining is going to ensure the continuity of the facility. There would have to be an expansion or contraction in the size of the plant for facility sustaining costs to change. So we are saying that these costs are generally of a fixed nature. For the size of the facility to change, or for the administration department numbers to change, or for that matter senior management to change, that is going to require a significant change in the size of either the plant, the production, or the entire facility. Otherwise, this cost is regarded as fixed cost. ABC advocates that these costs should not be assigned to products since they are unavoidable and irrelevant for most decisions. Instead, they are regarded as common costs to all products and deducted as lump sum from total of operating margin. Under the activity-based costing, these facility sustaining costs, they are not allocated to product, and it is recommended, therefore, that these costs should be pooled together and together as a lump sum charged to the total contribution arising from the revenues of the products being sold. So it is deducted in total, and therefore it is deducted before we are calculating final contributions and profits, and it is not charged to any single product or service, and it is not allocated and no basis is used. This way, we are avoiding an arbitrary allocation to the product of costs which are mainly irrelevant to decision making regarding the product. We are now going to see an example and try to compare the traditional costing with the ABC costing to understand what the differences are and how these differences can be reflected in the cost of the product. In this example, details of 4 products and relevant information for company are given below for one period. A period could be a year, it could be 1 month, it could be 1 quarter. So, for one period, 4 products A, B, C, and D, we have been given that output in units is 120 for A, 100 for B, 80 for C, and 120 for D. These are the number of units being produced. Cost per unit is shown as direct materials 40, 50, 30, and 60. Direct labor of 28 for A, 21 B, 14 for C, and 21 for D. Machine hours per unit are 4 in A, 3 in B, 2 in C, and 3 in D. The 4 products are similar and usually produced in production runs of 20 units and sold in batches of 10 units. Produced in runs of 20 units and sold in batches of 10 units. The production overheads are currently absorbed using a machine hour rate, and the total of the production overheads for the period has been analyzed as follows. Machine department costs, these include rent, depreciation, supervision, 10,430. Setup costs, 5,250. Stores, receiving, 3,600. Inspection and quality control, 2,100. Materials handling and dispatch, 4,620. So we have the example of a company. 4 products are being produced. We have been told how many units are being produced in one single period and the costs per unit that relate to it. The costs have included direct labor and direct material. And then we have been given a total of the overheads under various activities. So we are now going to see that by looking at these overheads and allocating them to the product, what product cost can be arrived at using the 2 different methods. You have ascertained that the cost drivers to be used are shown below for the overheads listed. In case of setup costs, the cost driver has been nominated as number of production runs. We have recently talked about setup costs. The costs are going to vary every time a production run is going to be performed. A production run is simply production activity for one batch. So every time there is a new batch or a new product, there is going to be a new production run. So the number of production runs will be the cost driver for setup costs. Stores receiving, here the cost driver is requisitions raised. Again, we will see that we are trying to identify as cost driver that aspect or that factor which is most likely to drive the significant portion of that activity. In a stores department, receiving activity is going to be determined by the number of requisitions that are raised. So that's every time in the store products are received, requisition is raised, and therefore action on requisition is going to involve store activity and drive the cost of the store. Inspection and quality control, we said, and we are now saying that cost driver is the number of production runs again. Inspection will need to be done every time a batch is produced. So therefore, as many batches are produced, that's going to determine how many inspections need to be carried out and quality checks need to be performed. Therefore, for inspection and quality cost, the cost driver has been chosen as number of production runs. Materials handling and dispatch, here orders executed. Dispatch relates to goods that are sent to the market. So the sales orders are going to determine how many goods at what time are being sent to the market. The number of requisitions raised on the stores is 20 for each product, and the number of orders executed is 42. Each order being for a batch of 10 units of a product. So in this example, therefore, we have seen that we were given data about the costs of 4 products, and then we were given data of the total overheads, and then we were told what would be the cost driver for each of the costs or activities that the overheads have been divided into. This is quite an important thing, the selection of cost drivers. We have spoken about that before, that the selection of cost drivers is going to be that aspect and that factor which is going to create significant amount of costs for that activity. So in our question, we have seen that setup costs, we are going to use production run as the cost driver. In case of store receiving, we are going to use the number of requisitions raised, and for activities relating to inspection and quality control, we are going to use again the production runs. These are the factors which are going to significantly determine what the cost of these activities is going to be. This is the scenario that has been given in the question, and now let's look at the requirements of the question. You are required to calculate the total costs for each product if all overhead costs are absorbed on a machine hour basis. This is the traditional system. Machine hours has been used as the basis to absorb overheads. And B, to calculate the total cost for each product using activity-based costing. So the two parts of the requirements are, first of all, to calculate the overheads being allocated to the product using the traditional basis of machine hours. This is a normal method that has been used, and we have discussed how all the overheads can be accumulated, and then the total machine hours are going to be used to arrive at a rate per machine hour, and that rate is used to allocate the overheads to the product. In the second part, we have been asked to allocate these overheads using activity-based costing. this is going to show us, is there a difference if we use the different bases of costing in the product cost. And part C is to calculate and list the unit product costs from your figures in A and B above to show the differences and comment briefly on any conclusions which may be drawn which could have pricing and profit implications. So this is what we will do in part C, that we are then going to compare the results from the traditional system and the activity-based system and highlight what differences there are, if any, and then to comment on the differences, because difference in product cost can lead to differences in product pricing. And so if we are going to price products differently, then that will have an implication on our profits. Therefore, that's how significant and important decisions of this nature can be in arriving at costs of the product. The costs will have influence on the pricing, and of course the pricing will determine the revenues and therefore the profits. Now let's see the solution. Part A, overheads absorbed on machine hour basis. Total machine hours have been calculated. We were told 120 units of output will be produced for product A, and it will require 4 hours of machine time. And similarly, 100 units were being produced of product B, which requires 3 hours per unit of machine time. In product C, we had 80 units being produced, and per unit machine hour time was 2 hours. And similarly for product D. So the total machine hours are 1300 hours that are going to be used for this output. To establish the machine hour overhead rate, we will take all the overheads that were given and total them and divide them by the 1300 hours of machine hour time. This gives us a rate of absorption based on machine hours of rupees 20 per machine hour. So then, applying this rate to arrive at the cost per unit of each product, we go back to the direct material cost. We were told is 40 per unit for A, 50 for B, 30 for C, and 60 for D. We will use the same labor cost as given in the question. Direct labor cost 28 for A, 21 for B, 14 for C, and 21 for D. And the overheads that we will use are going to be according to the rate calculated. We have the rate of 20 rupees per machine hour. We were told that product A requires 4 hours of machine time. So overheads allocated to product A will be 20 multiplied by 4, which is 80. And similarly for product B, where the machine hour time is 3 hours, the rate is 20, overheads allocated of 60, and also 40 and 60 to C and D. This gives us the total cost of each product. That amounts to 148 for product A, 131 for product B, 84 for product C, and 141 for product D. This is the per unit cost. We know the number of units that were being produced, and therefore we can also arrive at the total cost of the products for each product. So this is the method that we have used previously, and this is our traditional method to arrive at and calculate a machine hour rate for absorption of overheads, then use the direct material, direct labor cost as provided, as allocated, which is usually a direct cost, and then thirdly, to use the absorption rate of overheads, and by seeing the number of hours it takes for each unit to allocate the overheads to the product on the basis of machine hours. This has given us now the cost per unit for each product as well as the total cost. For part B, using activity-based costing, the costs of overhead being given to us is machine department 10,430. Here the cost driver is going to be machine hours because it's the machine department. We know that there are a total of 1,300 machine hours as just used in part A, and so the cost per unit of cost driver will be obtained by dividing the overhead cost of 10,430 by the volume of the cost driver of 1,300. This gives a cost per unit of 8.02. Similarly, for other overheads, setup costs of 5,250, where the production runs were designated as the cost driver, and we know that there are going to be 21 production runs. The products are being produced in batches of 20. So by looking at the quantity of output, we can see how many production runs there will be for each product, and by adding those together, we can arrive at the total of the production runs. Production runs are 21, and therefore the cost per unit for setup costs by using production run as the cost driver is 250. Stores receiving 3,600 was the overhead cost. We are going to use requisition as the cost driver, and we are told that there are 20 requisitions per product. For 4 products, that gives 80 requisitions, and the per unit cost is 45. Inspection and quality control, 2,100 the overhead cost, 21 the number of production runs, and 100 is the cost per unit. Material handling, 4,620. The cost driver were the number of orders. We were told there are 42 orders, and therefore the cost per unit for material handling is 110. So this is how we take activities, allocate the cost to the activities, then by use of the cost driver, we arrive at the cost driver rate. That is the rate we are going to use to allocate the overhead cost of that activity to the products. The suitability is something that is important. We said it needs to be considered carefully, and the way in which the cost driver rate was established is to take the total of the overhead cost for that activity and divide by the total volume of activity for that period. That has given us, therefore, the cost driver rate. Now we will see, by using this cost driver rate, we can allocate the cost of the overhead to the product. Cost for each product is computed by multiplying the cost driver rate per unit by the quantity of the cost driver consumed by each product. The 4 products are A, B, C, and D. Prime costs, everyone will remember what prime costs are. This is direct labor and direct material. In our example, direct material was rupees 40 and direct labor was 28, which gives 68 per unit. The number of units was, in the case of A, 120 units. So when we are going to multiply the per unit prime cost of direct labor and direct material with the number of units, we arrive at the prime cost. In case of A, it is 8160, B 7100, C 3520, and D 9720. For setups, the cost driver rate established is 250. Setups is the number of production runs, and we can see that for 120 units, at 20 units for each production run, there is going to be 6 production runs. So using 6 production runs, multiplying that by cost driver rate of 250, we get 1500 for product A. Using now for product B, the production runs is going to be 5, and for product C, production runs is going to be 4, based on 20 units per production run. So this way we have allocated the setup cost to the products on the basis of the cost driver. For stores, in the same way, the rate was 45 each requisition. We were told that the number of requisitions for each product is 20, and therefore 900 is allocated to all the products. And in the same way, for inspection, handling, and machines, to give us the total of the overhead that has been allocated. So in this method, we have used the cost drivers and the rate that has been computed for the cost driver, and then by comparing it with the consumption of the resource or consumption of activity by each product, we have allocated the overhead to each product. Now we can compare for part C the costs arrived from part A and part B. And from this slide, we can see that the difference is in A, where the cost is 136 under activity-based and 148 under the traditional method. So the traditional method was showing a greater cost than the activity-based method. For product B and C, it is showing a lower cost, and for product D, the costs are similar. These are going to have impact that if you are going to allocate cost to the product in a different way, then the pricing might also be different. So by looking at this comparison, we have seen that the use of the activity-based system provides a different cost to the use of the traditional system. And it is important that these cost allocations should be as accurate as possible, because this cost can determine the price, and the price will determine the profitability. So we might end up charging the wrong price, using the wrong cost, if we use an inaccurate system. That's all for today. Thank you very much.